Hello and thanks for joining us for this video. This video's paid partner is BetterHelp. So I've talked several times about seeing a therapist. Now I often think about things that I do that I felt were normal, but were actually my anxiety manifesting itself. For example, I've permanently damaged my fingers because I constantly bite my fingernails and chew on my fingers as a way to soothe myself. Then I get anxious because I think about how ugly my hands are and what people might say about them, so I chew on them even more. Also, I used to be so anxious that whenever my phone rang, it startled me to the point where I would jump. I was sure it was someone calling with bad news, although I mostly get spam calls. In the early years of making videos, just before they went live, I used to get physically sick thinking about what comments people may make, even though I know many of you watching leave kind, thoughtful, and constructive comments. But it got to be so bad that one negative comment discouraged me so much that I couldn't work for days. Then I found out that other people don't feel that anxious all the time, so I connected with a therapist and started talking to them. My therapist taught me a lot of things about anxiety, self-doubt, and insecurities, and more importantly, how to deal with them. Do you think therapy might help you? I know it's hard to get started with therapy. It may be easier to convince yourself that it's just normal to feel this way, but I'm telling you, you don't have to feel that way. Why not check out our paid partner, BetterHelp, and see if they can help you? On BetterHelp, you fill out a quick questionnaire and they'll match you with a therapist. It's important to feel comfortable with your therapist, so if you don't like the therapist you're matched with, you can switch at no extra cost. BetterHelp has a huge network of well-qualified professional therapists, plus a top-notch customer service team. On Trustpilot, they have over 7,000 reviews with an amazing 4.5-star rating. I think it's important to mention that needing or wanting therapy is a sign of strength, not weakness. To get started with BetterHelp, visit betterhelp.com/criminallylisted or click the link below the video and you'll save 10% on your first month of therapy. Don't wait another day to start feeling better. Check out BetterHelp today. We want to say a big thank you to BetterHelp for being today's paid partner. Number 3. Alexandria Vera. In April 2016, a peace officer with the Aldine Independent School District Police Department was called to Stovall Middle School in Houston, Texas. The principal had received a tip that 25-year-old English teacher Alexandria Vera was having an inappropriate relationship with a student. It was a boy who was only identified as JT. He was a 13-year-old in the 8th grade. The officer questioned Vera. She told the officer she met JT when she taught him summer school in 2015. She said he was rude initially, but then she found him charming. He asked for her Instagram account, but she didn't tell him her username. Nevertheless, he found her account and sent a request to follow her. She rejected the request. In September, Vera learned that JT was in her 8th grade English class. In class, he flirted and made inappropriate comments. One day, he wasn't in class, and she became concerned. She contacted him over Instagram to see if he was okay and to remind him that an assignment was due. They started chatting, and he asked for her phone number. Then he asked her to hang out. She agreed, and she picked him up in her car. They drove around for a bit, then made out in her car. The next day, which was around September 30th, JT's parents weren't home, so she went to his home. That's when they had sex for the first time. Weeks later, in October, the school hosted an open house and she met his parents for the first time. After the open house, she went to JT's home. He then introduced his 25-year-old 8th grade English teacher to his family as his girlfriend. Amazingly, even though the boy was 13 and she was his 25-year-old English teacher, his parents accepted the relationship. She was even invited to family events. Vera said that she and JT spent a lot of time together. They had sex daily. Usually he spent the night at her home and then she dropped him off so he could catch the school bus. Then in January, she became pregnant. She said that she and JT were excited and they told JT's family. They were also excited. In February 2016, a caseworker with Child Protective Services, visited the school and questioned her and JT. After that, she decided to terminate the pregnancy. 25-year-old Alexandria Vera was charged with continuous sexual abuse of a child, amongst other charges. In November 2016, Vera pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of aggravated sexual assault of a child. She was looking at a maximum of 30 years of prison, but was hoping for probation. In January 2017, she was sentenced to 10 years of prison. Vera was eligible for parole in January 2022. She was denied parole. In February 2025, the parole board decided she must serve her entire 10-year sentence. She will finish her sentence in January 2027. At the time of this video, 33-year-old Alexandria Vera is serving her sentence at the Coleman Work Facility in Lockhart, Texas. Number 2. Pamela Smart. In the spring of 1990, 22-year-old Pamela Smart and her husband, 24-year-old Greg Smart, lived in a Derry, New Hampshire condominium. Pam, a Florida State University graduate, worked as a media coordinator at a high school in Hampton, New Hampshire. Gregory was an insurance salesman. The couple met around Christmas 1986 when Greg threw a party at his parents' home. Pam's friend knew Greg, and Pam attended the party with her. Pam and Greg started dating a year later. They got married on May 7, 1989. On May 1, 1990, 22-year-old Pamela Smart rushed to a neighbor's home. She said she needed help because her husband was lying on the floor and not moving. The neighbor called 911. First responders arrived on the scene and found that the condominium had been ransacked. The body of 24-year-old Greg Smart was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been shot once in the back of the head with a .38 caliber hollow point bullet. Pamela was questioned, and she said she had been at a work meeting. She came home and found Greg on the floor. She was adamant Greg did not have any enemies and no one had any reason to kill him. The police believe that the killer or killers came in through the back door or the bulkhead doors to the cellar. Neither were locked. The police had several theories about the murder. A marijuana cigarette was found in Greg's car, so they considered the possibility that Greg was involved in drugs. But the police found no other evidence Greg was involved in the drug trade or in debt to a dealer. Greg liked to gamble occasionally, so one theory was that he was killed over his debts. But his finances did not seem to be problematic. The leading theory was that Greg came home and discovered his house being burglarized and he was killed. However, the police were not confident that this is what happened. Notably, not much was stolen from the home, just some of Pam's jewelry. But Greg's 3-diamond gold ring, his keys, and wallet were all left behind. Also, most burglars would run away if someone interrupted them while they were robbing a home. Normally, they would not force a person to their knees and murder them execution style. Also, why did they choose the couple's home to burglarize? It was in a busy condo community where people were constantly coming and going. Also, Pamela and Greg weren't wealthy and weren't known to keep valuables in the house. One thing that the police noted was that despite being told not to talk to the press, Pam frequently spoke to reporters. She said things like the police were sure it was a robbery gone wrong. The police continued to investigate the murder, but in the days after it, not much progress was made. Then, 13 days after the murder, the police received an anonymous tip. The caller said that a 15-year-old girl named Cecilia Pierce had information about Greg's murder. Pam and Cecilia met when they both volunteered at a drug and alcohol awareness program for first-year high school students. After that, Cecilia became an intern for Pam. Cecilia even hung out at Pam's home. When Greg was out of town, she spent the night. The police had several other leads, so Cecilia wasn't interviewed immediately. Then on June 10, 1990, nearly a month and a half after the murder, a couple brought in a gun to the police station. The couple explained they had a 17-year-old son, Vance Latame Jr., who went by JR. One of JR's friends told them JR and his friend had used the gun in a murder. The friend didn't say what murder, but the Latames knew that their son talked about Pam Smart regularly, and they knew her husband had recently been shot. The police then talked to JR's friend. He said that JR and 3 of his other friends had talked about the murder. The 3 friends were 16-year-old William Billy Flynn, 16-year-old Patrick Randall, who went by Pete, and 18-year-old Raymond Fowler. Ballistic testing was done on the gun, and it was determined to be the murder weapon. On June 11th, Billy, Pete, and JR were charged with murder. That same day, the police interviewed Cecilia Pierce. Initially, she claimed to know nothing about the murder, but then a few days later, she came clean. She said that for several months, 22-year-old Pam had been in a sexual relationship with 16-year-old Billy Flynn. Billy was a decent student, and there were no major behavioral problems. He was considered polite and charming. However, his mother said he had anger problems. In January 1987, Billy's father was driving drunk and he slammed into a gasoline tanker. He was killed and had to be identified using his dental records. Before the relationship started, Pam told Cecilia that she was in love with Billy. First, Pam gave Billy a roll of film to get developed. It had photos of her in a swimsuit. She then asked him to take some photos of her. Then, in mid-February, they had sex for the first time in Pam and Greg's bed. For months, they were meeting in secret to have sex. They even went on dates, like to an arcade, and exchanged love letters. One time when Pam dropped off Billy to hang out with his friends, she gave him a romantic kiss goodbye. Cecilia said she wasn't involved in the murder, but she had heard Pam and Billy talking about it. Cecilia agreed to wear a wire when she talked to Pam. Cecilia recorded Pam saying some incriminating things. For example, she said that the 3 young men were going to accuse her of paying them to commit the murder, and she was going to deny it. She thought she would make a more believable witness. She thought that people would believe her over them. She also said that JR was going to say she gave him a set of speakers, and she was going to say that was nonsense. However, the police found a pair of high-end speakers in JR's room. The police knew that the speakers came from Pam and Greg's home. The speakers had been found close to the door. The police thought that the killer was going to take the speakers with them, but for some reason left them behind. On August 1st, 1990, 3 months after Greg Smart was murdered, Pam Smart was arrested for murder. In January 1991, Billy Flynn, Pete Randall, and J.R. Latame pleaded guilty. They all confessed to their roles in the murder. Billy said he first met Pam while volunteering at the Alcohol and Drug Awareness Program. He confirmed he had been having sex with Pam for months. She told him that Greg was physically and verbally abusive. As Billy was falling in love with Pam, his hatred for her husband grew. Not only was she spending time with him and sleeping in the same bed, but he also thought he was abusing her. Pam told him the only way they could be together was if Greg was dead. For months, they frequently brainstormed ideas on how to get rid of Greg. Pam eventually settled on a botched robbery motive. She was going to leave the back doors unlocked. She told Billy he could take what he wanted and then trash the condominium. She would have an airtight alibi because she was at a work meeting with plenty of witnesses. Initially, Billy was supposed to kill Greg in March, but Billy couldn't get a gun or a car. Pam was upset and accused him of not loving her. She then broke up with him. The next day, she apologized and said he could make it up to her the next month, when she had another meeting. Billy then enlisted the help of his two best friends, Pete Randall and J.R. Latimer. A fourth man, 18-year-old Raymond Fowler, who was crashing at J.R.'s home, also became involved. In mid-April, Raymond and Billy borrowed Pam's car and they were going to kill Greg with a knife. But they claimed as they were driving to the condominium, they got lost. The next morning, Pam complained to Cecilia that they had failed, but she was still committed to killing her husband. Billy then told Pam that J.R., Pete, and Raymond would help with the murder. Billy said they wanted $1,000 each. Pam said she would pay them $500 each in $50 weekly installments. Billy accepted the deal. J.R. borrowed his grandmother's car and stole the gun from his father. On the evening of May 1st, 1990, Pam left for her work meeting before Greg arrived home for work. While the condominium was empty, Raymond and J.R. dropped off 16-year-old Billy and 16-year-old Pete near the couple's condominium. They entered through the unlocked back door and trashed the home. When Greg arrived home, they ambushed him. Pete forced Greg to his knees and held a knife to his throat. Initially, Pete planned to slit his throat, but he couldn't go through with it. Billy pulled the gun from the waistband of his pants and said, quote, "God forgive me," unquote. Then he shot 24-year-old Greg Smart in the back of the head. The teen boys immediately ran out the back door. J.R. and Raymond picked them up in the car. On the same day the three teen boys pleaded guilty, Raymond Fowler was arrested. Pam Smart went to trial for her husband's murder on March 4th, 1991. It was broadcast live on Court TV. It was the first ever nationally televised murder trial. Billy Flynn, J.R. Latimer, and Pete Randall testified against Pam. They claimed she was the mastermind. Pam's lawyer said that Pam was not involved in the murder. The lawyer acknowledged that Pam and Billy had an inappropriate and illegal relationship, but that did not prove she wanted her husband dead. The lawyer said that Billy became enraged after Pam broke it off, so he killed her husband. The lawyer called the young men thrill killers. It was a 14-day trial, and the jury deliberated for 13 hours. Pam Smart was found guilty of murder. In August 1992, 18-year-old Billy Flynn was sentenced to 40 years to life. He would have to serve at least 28 years before he was released. Pete Randall, who went to the home with Billy, received the same sentence. J.R. Latimer, who provided the gun and the car, was sentenced to 18 years to life. Raymond Fowler also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, and he was sentenced to 15 to 30 years of prison. Pam Smart was sentenced to life without parole. Raymond Fowler was paroled in 2003 after serving 12 years. J.R. Latimer was paroled 2 years later. Both Pete Randall and Billy Flynn were released early in 2015, 25 years after the murder. Pam had maintained she was innocent for years, but then in 2024 she admitted to being the mastermind of the murder. It's believed she finally took responsibility because she hopes to get a sentence reduction. At the time of this video, 57-year-old Pamela Smart is incarcerated at the Medford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in Westchester County, New York. She has served nearly 35 years for the murder of her husband. Number 1. Karen Greenlee. On December 10, 1979, 33-year-old John McCure was found dead in a Sacramento, California apartment. He died of an overdose of alcohol and antidepressant medication. It's believed he purposely overdosed. The night before, he and his mother had argued about his drinking. McCure's funeral was held on December 15th. There was a private burial scheduled for 10 a.m. on December 17th. His body was being held at the Memorial Lawn Mortuary in Sacramento. On the morning of December 17th, McCure's body was in a 1975 black hearse parked at the mortuary. When the driver went to the hearse to deliver the body to the cemetery, they discovered that the hearse and John McCure's body were missing. They also learned that one of the employees who lived in an apartment above the mortuary, 21-year-old Karen Greenlee, was missing. She was an apprentice embalmer who had worked at the mortuary for about 5 months. Everyone considered her a quiet but competent employee. The morning that McCure's body went missing, Greenlee left the mortuary around 4 a.m. She said she was going to pick up a body and bring it back to the mortuary. However, the vehicle to do those pickups was still parked at the mortuary. An All Points bulletin was put out for the hearse. About 36 hours after Greenlee went missing with the hearse, sheriff's deputies found the hearse partially hidden behind some bushes over 100 miles from the mortuary near Allegheny, California. 3 sheriff's deputies and a California Highway Patrol officer surrounded the car. It was locked, but they discovered that Greenlee was in the back of the hearse with the body. They tried to get her to come out, and she refused. They spent 90 minutes convincing her to exit the vehicle before she finally relented. She told them she had swallowed 20 pills of codeine Tylenol. She was taken to the hospital and her stomach was pumped. The police found a 4.5-page note written by Greenlee. In the note, she revealed that over 2 months, she had sexual contact with 20 to 40 men's dead bodies. She wrote, quote, "I'm a necrophiliac, alcoholic, scared, mixed up, lonely, unadjusted adult. My life is a nightmare. I wish I never grew up. I wish I could have killed myself in 1973. I almost did, never could do anything right. Why do I do it? Why? Fear of love, relationships hurt in the past. No romance ever hurt like this. It's not much fun to look into the eyes of a young widow after making it with their loved ones. It's the pits, I'm a morgue rat. This is my rat hole, perhaps my grave," unquote. The police then began to investigate 21-year-old Karen Greenlee's background. She was born in 1958 in California. According to her father, when she was 8, she was sexually molested by a neighbor. Her family noticed a change in her, but they didn't find out till later that she had been abused. At age 14, she was raped by a teacher. 2 other students accused the teacher of rape as well. The teacher was charged and Karen Greenlee testified against him. He was found guilty. That same year, Greenlee was hospitalized due to emotional problems. In her letter, she wrote that around this time, she started sleeping in cemeteries. Greenlee graduated from high school in 1978 and became an apprentice embalmer at a mortuary in Auburn, California. But she left the job after a few months because she was having problems controlling her necrophiliac feelings. Then in August 1979, she started working at the Sacramento Memorial Lawn Mortuary. Starting in October, she began to have sexual contact with the bodies. Greenlee was interrogated, and she said it was a compulsion she couldn't control. She compared it to an addiction. At the time, California did not have any laws against necrophilia, so she was charged with stealing the hearse and body snatching. In March 1980, she pleaded guilty and served 11 days in jail. She was fined $255 and sentenced to 2 years of probation. John McCure's mother sued Greenlee and the mortuary. In her letter, Greenlee wrote that the other mortuary employees probably knew what she was doing. McCure's mother was seeking $1 million to $1.5 million. Greenlee testified at the hearing. She admitted to engaging in necrophilia with the bodies of 20 to 40 men, including McCure's body. She never explained why she stole McCure's body. She also talked about her childhood, which included being sexually assaulted by her neighbor and her teacher, and her problems with alcohol. The jury found Greenlee and the mortuary liable, and Mercedes' mother was awarded $142,500. Many of the jurors felt sorry for Greenlee and hoped she would get help with her mental health. After the trial, Greenlee stayed out of the media spotlight for 5 years. Then, in 1987, she was interviewed by Jim Morton for his book, Apocalypse Culture. The interview took place in Greenlee's apartment, which Morton described as, quote, full of books, necrophiliac drawings, and satanic adornments. Greenlee said she was more comfortable with her sexuality than she was when she wrote the infamous 4.5-page note. She said, quote, when I wrote that letter, I was still listening to society. Everyone said necrophilia was wrong, so I must be doing something wrong. But the more people tried to convince me that I was crazy, the more sure of my desires I became, unquote. She said that men thought she was necrophiliac because she couldn't get a living man. They were convinced that if she had sex with them, they would cure her of her desire to sleep with corpses. Greenlee was asked how she physiologically had sex with the dead men. She said that sexual penetration wasn't needed for sexual gratification. She went on to say, quote, I find the odor of death very erotic. There are death odors, and there are death odors. Now you get your body that's been floating in the bay for 2 weeks, or a burn victim. That doesn't attract me much, but a freshly embalmed corpse is something else. There's also this attraction to blood. When you're on top of a body, it tends to purge blood out of the mouth while you're making passionate love. You'd have to be there, I guess, unquote. She also said that after she stole the hearse and Mercer's body, she got a job at another funeral home in a different state, and she continued with what she called her, quote, extracurricular activities, unquote. They said it took them a year to figure out what she was doing, and she was fired. She said that necrophilia is more common than one might expect, and funeral homes simply don't report it. A transcript of the interview was printed in the book under the title, The Unrepentant Necrophile. Greenlee supposedly regretted the interview and changed her name. Karen Greenlee has stayed out of the public eye since then. Her current whereabouts are unknown. If she is still alive, she would be about 67 years old. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We just want to remind you we started a channel membership where half the funds will go to solve a cold case. For more information, click on the video that's on the screen now. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.